Hello, this is Coach Tim Campbell, and I'm your host for the Self-Made is a Myth, Make a Difference Together show, where we're interviewing successful business owners to hear their stories of the journey to building their business. And because we know that achieving success in business is not something that we do on our own, we take time to recognize the folks who helped us to excel and came alongside of us, supported us along the way. Today, I'm excited to have a fellow business owner with us today. And my guest has been tracking his steps for over 20 years. So imagine that, right? Well before the technology that makes it so easy today to do was in place. And apparently there's some Excel spreadsheets that we can look at to see this average. So that is so cool. He enjoys taking pictures of sports and has spent many years following his kids around and in their sports career. And that leads us into what is he most proud of, and it is his 3 children. It is my pleasure to welcome Frank to the show today. Hey, Frank.
Tim, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's start with you introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit of your personal story, where you were born, where you live, a little bit more about your family and some of your hobbies.
Yeah, I live in Columbus, Ohio. I moved here in 1984 to go to law school. I grew up, I was born in Chicago. We moved when I was 8 to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, about 4 hours north of Green Bay. My dad was a college professor in Houghton, Michigan. That's my hometown. Shout out to Houghton. Graduated there, went to college in Wisconsin. I literally went to college without visiting. I just wanted to play football. There was a small Division III school in Beloit, Wisconsin that I played at. And that led me into law school, 1984 at the Ohio State University. I have a law degree and I have an MBA from Ohio State. And from there, I got a job in public accounting as a tax consultant. And it was a great job. It was great pay. It was great everything, except I didn't want to do taxes for the rest of my life. So I left and went into private practice. And I tell people that a funny thing happened when I went into private practice. And the funny thing was that nothing happened. I had no idea how to get business. Because when you start in a big firm, well, they don't teach you that stuff in school. When you start with a big firm, the work is just there. So I struggled. And that really kind of led me into getting into a networking organization. Make a long story really short, I ended up buying it in the early 2000s and stopped the practice of law. So I run an organization very similar to BNI that helps entrepreneurs, sales reps, and professionals become more successful through their professional relationships.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about the family and the sports and photography and all that wonderful stuff.
Yeah, my kids, I played college football. I was a football guy. I still like football, but when my oldest was 4 years old, he got into soccer, and then that led my daughter into soccer and led my son into soccer. And it led me to be a parent coach, such as it is. And they just got deeper and deeper into soccer, and football never got on the radar, which is fine. And they played, all through grade school, high school, and then had the opportunity to play in college. Years ago, I think my oldest was in 8th grade. There was a parent who had a camera, and he took a really neat picture of a couple of the boys. And I'm like, oh, I need to do that. I need to just go get a camera. And I did. But Tim, here's the irony. I bought a camera to get pictures of my kids. But I end up taking less pictures of my kids because when they've got the ball or they're doing something I want to watch,
right?
I have my face in a camera. But I estimate that I've probably taken 250,000 pictures of like all the kids, all my kids' teammates, and wherever there's somebody that I have a connection to, I'll take a picture. And I tell people it's the best investment I've ever made buying a camera. I probably have $4,000 or $5,000 in camera equipment, and I've never made a dime. But it just the joy that it brings other people to have pictures of their kids. So that's what I love to do.
Oh, that's awesome. So not very many people will appreciate this story, but I know being from the UP, you will. So I'm originally from Canada, and I tell people that I moved north to come to the US.
I believe it. It's entirely possible.
So I moved to Milwaukee
Right.
when I first moved here. Yeah.
Yep.
So Frank, tell us, what's a funny story that your family likes to share about you that you'd be willing to share with us?
Oh boy. Where do I start? Funny stories. My kids are always teasing me about social media. I have a podcast as well, and they're always joking with me about the podcast. To them, it's just kind of a joke, little hobby.
Uh-huh.
To me, like you, it's real business, right? I mean, I'm talking to real people. But to them, and I don't think they've ever listened to an episode, they just think it's idle banter.
Right. So you told us a little bit already about how the business came about, but at what point did you have the confidence that you could run your own business?
I've always been really entrepreneurial, and I think that was part of, I always have. When I was a kid, I sold night crawlers by the side of the road, put out a sign, 35 cents a piece, about 35 cents for a dozen, 3 dozen for $1. I would go to the golf course after it rained and pick night crawlers. My parents would take me, and they would just come out in the thousands, and you pick them and put them in buckets. And so, when I went off to school, even in college, I always had this mind of starting a business. And when I was in public accounting, I was always enamored with how the clients made money. Certainly, I would help them with the tax part of the business, but I was enamored with, okay, how do you make money? Talking about margins, and I always felt like, okay, there was something out there for me. And I always knew I was going to do something. It is a very scary thing, as hey, I'm exchanging this paycheck for total control of your life, except for the revenue piece of it, right?
Right. Those golden handcuffs are pretty heavy, right?
They are. And I would tell people that if somebody would have nudged me just a little bit, I would have stayed, but they didn't, and I left. And so it's at some point it moves over from courage to just necessity, right? It's like jumping in the water. I got to learn to swim.
Right.
I just have to. And so then it's not a matter of courage. It's just a matter of doing it at that point.
Yeah. So tell us, Frank, a little bit more about the business. You compared it to B&I, but help us on what's the name of the company? How do you help folks? How can folks get a hold of you to learn more about being part of your group?
Yeah, it's called AmSpirit Business Connections. AmSpirit is short for American Spirit. And we have a website, amspirit.com. Certainly people can find me through that website, my email. But we help entrepreneurs, sales reps, and professionals put together, operate, grow weekly meetings where they learn about each other and exchange referrals. The big piece of it is it's really about developing relationships.
Right.
People come to these sorts of groups, and there are lots of them out there, and they think, well, I just show up and I just pay my money and it's all going to work. And it's like, no, you have to really do two things. One, you have to develop relationships, because we don't do business with people we don't know, like, and trust. And so that relationship is paramount. But even once people have that relationship, and this is a lot of what we do in our groups, is coaching people on getting others to understand how to recognize opportunities. Right. I could be sitting next to a ball game with a perfect client for you. I could know you. I could think you're the greatest person in the world. But if I don't have a sense as to, hey, this person should be working with you, that opportunity is going to be missed. And so that's a lot of what we try to do in the organization, is getting people to understand, stop talking jargon, break it down into the simplest terms. Don't tell me what you do. Tell me when you do it. Talk about the types of clients you have, things along those lines.
It's funny you mentioned they think that if they just show up, it's going to work. So it's kind of goes back to your first story too, of, hey, a lot of us, when we start our business, we also think that it's just going to work, and then we realize, oh, we actually have to put some effort into this, and right, and do the do, and connect the dots and build the relationships. And so I love that that you've got that organization there to help folks to accelerate that learning curve and become better salespeople or better business owners through building relationships. What would you say is the biggest aha that new members have when they come into your organization?
Oh, I think that it's very simple. I call it a bait and switch. Networking is the greatest bait and switch. Bait and switch, for people who are not familiar, that's where the car dealership advertises the fully loaded van for $25,000, and you show up and, oh, we're sold out. But they've got you there, so they're going to sell you something else. They'll sell you one for $50,000. That's a bait and switch. And the reason I call networking a bait and switch is because we all come to networking looking for business. We look for people to give to us. But the switch is once you're in, you have to explain to people, you need to give to people first.
Right.
You get from this, but you have to give first.
Right.
And that's hard for people to kind of, well, wait a minute here, I'm here to get, we understand. You got to build these relationships. And part of that is helping these other people.
Right.
And so some people don't get that.
Yeah.
The people who are successful do.
So Frank, tell us a story of where someone pushed you or inspired you that you could do it, and the impact that they had on you and your business, and how they helped you to get there.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of stories along the way of, different stages, right? Hey, you can read, you can do this, you can play football, whatever, you can skate, whatever it might be. But back in 2007, 2008, I made the decision I was going to start offering franchises. And that's a whole nother animal. It's one thing to have a business. It's one thing to run your business. It's another business to empower other people to run the business.
Right.
And, and you can have all that stuff in place, but then it's trying to sell the franchises. And there's a wonderful person that I had come to know, still good friends with him, Regan Rodriguez. He's down in Miami, Florida now, but he was a franchise consultant, and he really helped me understand how to get it moving, because it was such a big task in front of me.
Sure.
That it was such a big task that you didn't know where to start. And so he just kind of coached me on what he did. He had a point system. Every day he had to generate 20 points. And I think it was 20, but it was some sort of point system, and you had to do so many things to accumulate points, and you couldn't stop until you did it. Some days you'd be done by noon and you could keep going, or you could say, I'm done. Other days it would be 7, 8 o'clock at night and you're still at 15 points, and you had to keep churning away. And that was a real help for me, because and that's, it's true of business people. It's true of lots of people. We deceive ourselves, right? We deceive ourselves in thinking that I'm busy, so I must be productive. And they're not the same thing.
Yes.
As you know.
Yes. Yes. I like that idea of deception, because we, on the other side, we can also deceive ourselves by saying that it's too hard, or it's too much work, or we don't have it in us. But then you see these inspiring stories of super athletes and how much they can push themselves. Like, well, then it must be in me too, if I just actually open my mind to the possibilities.
Yep.
So Frank, what's your biggest learning as a business owner?
Well, my biggest learning as a business owner is that the learning never stops. It never stops. And it shouldn't stop. I think there was a time in American society where experience ruled the day, right? When there were layoffs in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was generally younger people that were being let go because they didn't have the value,
right?
And they kept the older people. Now we've kind of seen a shift in the opposite direction, where the people that are being pushed aside are the people who are older. And a lot of times people will think, well, it's because they cost more.
Yeah.
Well, that's in part true, but it's really ROI. right? Before, the ROI was with the older people. Now it's okay. Maybe we're not getting as much from these younger people, but but we're not paying as much either, and the ROI is here. And so what I've found is, and I keep telling myself, I'm never going to stop trying to find ways to become just more knowledgeable about whatever. Podcasting, I'm going to figure it out. What Facebook, I'm going to figure it out. And I'm not going to get into TikTok. I'm not going to do everything. But I'm not going to shy away from something with the grumpy old man persona of, oh, I'm not going to mess with that. Again, I love my kids. My kids are very helpful. I have a podcast. I credit my daughter because she got me started with it and really kind of made it idiot proof, if you will. But it really starts with us wanting to learn and saying, okay, I'm going to try and just add a little bit more to my toolbox, just, more and more. So that's the biggest lesson, that, you always need to be taking lessons.
Yeah, I love that. And the good thing for us who are, a little older is that all this new technology, there's simple ways, there's YouTube videos to show us how to run it, right? And we don't have to buy all the big expensive equipment of years past. Everything has been created to make it a lot easier for us to do a podcast like this via Zoom, as opposed to having to have a big production budget and multiple people running the cameras for us. So.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. It really kind of levels the playing field, if you will. And I think there are a lot of people out there that have built some very successful businesses out there with not a lot of investment, taking advantage of the things that are there. YouTube's a great example. I wish I had that in high school, right? I mean, you struggle through chemistry and all you can do is go to the teacher. And if they're talking at this level, Tim, you're screwed, right? Yes. You don't understand it. You can find something on YouTube that's going to walk you through it at your pace. And I didn't get it, I'll watch it again. Let me watch it again.
Yes. And there's like 100 different versions. So if you don't like you don't understand the first version, right? You go to the person who's dumbed it down a little bit more, or is talking more at your level. Yeah. So Frank, we know that business success doesn't happen in isolation. So tell us about a challenge that you had over the years, and maybe a fellow business owner who came alongside you and helped you get through that. Talked about earlier, continuing to learn. So Jim Rohn is one of my favorite authors. He says we become the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So as you think about that, is that something that's exciting for you? Something that makes you nervous? How do you think about that from a business standpoint?
I love that quote as well. And it really makes me think about who I'm hanging out with. It really does. And when I first heard it, there was a group that I hung out with, business people, and they're good people, but it's like, they're not seeing as big as I'm seeing. They're just not. And I need to move beyond this. And so I backed away from that. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't scare me, but it always makes me question, okay, is this person going to challenge me? Is this person going to pull me back? And just continually kind of asking those questions. And I don't, with the internet and Zoom, we have a huge ability to connect with lots of different people. Yes. And so you never really should have to feel like you're stuck.
Exactly. I've heard people say, well, I don't really have access to it. Like, yes, you do, to your point, right?
Yeah.
You can read a book.
Yeah.
And your 5 people can be your 5 favorite authors, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They're out there. Yeah. And you know what? If you're a decent person, they'll want to add you as well. Right? They'll want to add you as well. So I
love that. Yes. Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you said in the very beginning. If we pour into other people, right, the whole give first to get back, if we pour into others, then they'll be willing to pour back into us, and then it becomes a win-win.
Yeah.
So last question here, Frank, if something catastrophic was to happen in the business, who's the first person you'd call, and what would that conversation be?
Oh boy, it depends on the catastrophe. I call my wife all the time with catastrophes. I call her all the time with things. Well, really, it does depend upon the catastrophe, because I think everybody has different skills out there. My wife, the accounting, the QuickBooks, just kind of understanding what's going on. If there are website issues, I have a couple franchisees, Tom Anderson, this guy, Matt Ward, who had a web business and sold it, did very well in that business. He's now a professional speaker, but people I can bounce ideas off of.
Right.
I've got a couple franchisees, Kayleen Marshall and Paula Ankley, who have a strong background in like John Maxwell leadership types things, so, hey, I'm putting together this leadership conference. I'm kind of stuck. So it really depends upon what the catastrophe is. And I think that's how we need to look at life. There's no one person that's going to solve our problems. It's just it's a litany of people depending upon where we're at.
I love that, because it goes back to the whole essence of what you've been sharing throughout our conversation, of the power of having a strong network, right?
Yeah.
So, Frank, it's clear that you've been blessed with some incredible people who have helped you along the journey. If they were all on the show today, what would you like to say to them?
Thank you. Don't hate me, because I'm not perfect. Well, I have my moments. No, but yeah, certainly thank you. I think sometimes we're horrible critics of ourselves, and we'll have bad moments, and we tend to think about those bad moments, linger on them longer than they do. There's certainly a deep appreciation for where it's at. I have not built this. It's all of them who have built it, right? Even the rank and file members. I have members who've been around 27 years, and they're always just trying to help make it better. And it plays right into what you do. I would not have done this. It would not be where it's at without others. It just wouldn't.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Frank, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's a pleasure speaking with you and hearing some of your insights and a little bit of your personal story. So again, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
To everyone who tuned in, thanks for listening to Self-Made as a Myth show with your host, Coach Tim Campsell. Be sure to help us spread this movement by liking the show and posting it on your social media. To join our movement, go to bemadtogether.com. All right, folks, that's a wrap. Make sure to pay it forward, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.